everyone. Thank you, Mr. Rudolph, for introducing me to everyone. My name is Beth Wartella. I'm the new Door County Veteran Service Officer. Some of you may not know, but Scott McFarland retired in the end of September, so we were really excited to see him off on the new adventure in his life. I'm very grateful that the county appointed me to be the new Veteran Service Officer. I've been working in that office for, it'll be 5 years on December 1st. So I have a lot of knowledge and skill sets under my belt, but I learn something new every day, and that's what keeps the job exciting. I'm originally from Door County. My grandma and her siblings actually attended Sevastopol High. Their last name was Butler, and then at the start of the war, they actually sold their house in West Jacksonport and moved into town where they would have more resources as far as jobs, and it was cheaper to live at the time, and they didn't have to keep up the farm. So they actually owned the house that was right across from Bly's Bar. So I'm very integrated with the community here, and I'm sure if you rattle off a few last names, I would say, yep, I'm related to them. No, I'm related to them. So I served in the United States Navy from 2008 to 2011 as a Master at Arms, which is the equivalent of an MP, or military police. And I was stationed in West Virginia, which might surprise you since I was in the Navy. There was actually a small communications base isolated in the middle of the Shenandoah Valley out in West Virginia, and that's where I spent my 4 years serving. I worked jointly with the National Security Agency, the CIA, the Air Force, and several other federal organizations. My main job was patrolling, dispatching, and standing gate for a 600-acre facility that included an underground building, and anybody that worked in that underground building had to have a top-secret clearance. So the only reason why I ever was allowed into the building was in order to train for a hostage or terrorist situation. So not a whole lot of knowledge of what was actually going down in the underground building and what they were doing, but we had a base of about, I'd say, 500 people, so it was very, very small. It's actually decommissioned now, and the state of West Virginia plans to buy that property because it has a clinic, fire department, bays. It had a whole group of different facilities so that it was, we were all able to get the things that we needed, our day-to-day necessities, and not have to be running across the mountain into Virginia to do our shopping. So I know that some of you stood when your service song came on, but I'd also like to get a better idea of what eras you served in. So do we have any World War II veterans in here today? Nope, I think we only have a couple left in the county, unfortunately. So if you know any of them, make sure that you thank them for their service, because they're honestly probably, as everyone says, the best generation, but they really did pave our way for some of the benefits that we're entitled to right now, presently. How about Korean War or era veterans? Any in attendance today? Okay, how about Vietnam? It should be a large majority of you guys. All right, great. And do we have anybody that served in Vietnam, but in the outlying waters of Vietnam, like the Gulf of Tonkin or the South Pacific? Anybody? Okay. How about Vietnam era, but you were stationed in Thailand or Guam, or Korea for that matter? Midway, okay. Well, that's good. I know that the large majority, or the population of our veterans here in Door County is are from the Korean era and the Vietnam era. So that's terrific. We honestly don't have a lot of people that are my age or younger coming back to the county at this time. There just aren't jobs available. And when they have their trained skill set from the military and they're coming back home to Wisconsin, they would rather probably move to a larger city where they have more jobs and resources available to them. But one of my main objectives through my office, with the help from my assistant Nathan LeClaire, who's also a Navy veteran, we help veterans transition when they get out of the military and help them obtain their benefits through our office, whether that's for federal VA benefits, state VA benefits, or local benefits for veterans. So before the presentation, I handed everyone a sheet of our core benefits. One of the main benefits that we help veterans obtain is their VA healthcare benefits. Right now, if you're not in the VA healthcare system, I wouldn't say that you're missing out on a whole lot. I know that's unfortunate to say, but I'm not in the VA's chain of command, so I have more liberties of what I can and can't say about their services. And right now, the VA clinic in Green Bay, while they offer good care, it hasn't been consistent for veterans, which is disconcerting. And they also have very few readily available physicians. So they're actually sending more veterans out in the community, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because veterans aren't having to drive down to Green Bay. However, the hoops that they have to jump through to obtain those appointments is very convoluted and confusing for the veterans. So if you have any questions or concerns about your current care or your health care eligibility, please feel free to call our office and we can discuss what your best options would be. One of the main things that I work on through our office is helping veterans obtain their service-connected disability compensation. So a lot of veterans have incidents or accidents while they're in the service that can affect them long after they separate from the service. And I'll help the veterans obtain the materials from their records, their service records, their official military personnel file, any of the documents that will help substantiate a claim with the VA for them to receive monthly compensation. And with each different percentage as you increase in severity with the compensation that you're receiving, there's also more benefits available. So one of the big things that people keep hearing about right now are the property tax credits that may be eligible for some veterans. That right now is the only veterans that are eligible for property tax credit is veterans that are receiving 100% disability compensation from the VA. One of the other programs that we work with frequently in my office is the pension program. It's available for veterans that served during a wartime era. It's also eligible for the spouses of veterans who served during a wartime era. And the main objective of this program is to provide monthly assistance to veterans or their spouses when they get into a position that they can no longer afford their medical care. For example, if their Social Security check is only $850 each month, but they have to pay $2,000 in an assisted living facility or nursing care facility, we can help obtain that additional income for them so they can stay in a level of care and in a home provided with the care that they needed. One of the unfortunate things that we do work with through our office is the burial benefits. So every morning when I get into work, I make my coffee and I sit down and I have to look at all the obituaries. Thank heavens, a lot of the times there's people that I know, but they aren't veterans that I have actually worked with. But in the situation where we do see a veteran that has passed away, we make sure that we reach out to their next of kin. So we'll contact their spouse or their oldest child, whoever's handling their funeral affairs. We'll also work with the local funeral homes to make sure that the veteran that has passed away can obtain their government marker. I'm sure you're all familiar with those. When you walk through the cemetery, there's the small bronze ones or the larger bronze ones that you see. We can help the veteran's family apply for that through our office. If the veteran is receiving monthly compensation from the VA, their family may be entitled to a burial allowance as well. So all of those benefits that are still available to a veteran once he passes, we work with the family to make sure that we get those secured for them. Any questions so far? All right. One of the new things that's coming down the pike into 2020 is that the VA is now going to open up compensation claims and allow veterans who served during the Vietnam War but were on a naval or Coast Guard ship in the outlying waters of Vietnam. Those veterans will finally be able to submit claims for conditions that they have been diagnosed with. When we are discussing some of the conditions that veterans commonly have after being exposed to Agent Orange, some of those are the diabetes type 2, ischemic heart disease, prostate cancer, Parkinson's, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and there's a lot of other secondary cancers and ailments that are contributed to Agent Orange exposure. Up until this time, veterans who were in country Vietnam were the only ones that were able to file for compensation for these conditions. Now, starting in 2020, we'll be able to obtain those benefits for the Blue Water Navy veterans as well. For example, I have an uncle that lives out in Colorado, and when he graduated high school, he was drafted, but it was towards the end of the draft, and he was in the Navy. So he was in Vietnam roughly between 73 and 74, and he was actually bringing back refugees, and they were placing them into the kind of the safe places that we had negotiated with other countries. So he was picking up these refugees from Vietnam and bringing them to the other countries. You know, they're only wearing the clothes that they have and on their backs, and they had been exposed to Agent Orange. Long story short, years later, he was exposed. He had been noted to be exposed to Agent Orange and had developed prostate cancer. Well, he wasn't allowed to file for a claim with the VA because he served in the Navy and wasn't in country Vietnam. So this is going to help a lot of veterans that have developed the same conditions as the in-country Vietnam veterans and open up a lot of different types of care and benefits for them. And it's something that the American Legion and the VFW and many other service organizations have been lobbying for in Congress and out in Washington, D.C. So we're finally happy in the CVSO world to see that this is finally coming together and we're going to be able to help these veterans. So what I've done is I called any veteran that I've worked with in the past that I knew was Blue Water Navy that we have done a claim with in the past that had been denied benefits. I made sure I went through my whole long list of names over the past 5 years and picked out all the Blue Water Navy veterans and called them into my office to explain what we were gearing up for. So they're prepared come January 1st of 2020 to get those claims in. We also will help veterans obtain their educational benefits. So there's a couple state educational benefits that many people aren't aware of. We have the Wisconsin GI Bill, which will pay for tuition. It won't pay for books, but it'll pay for up to 128 credits of college at a university in the Wisconsin system. So that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell. There's a lot of different challenges that we experience. We'll help veterans you wouldn't think that Delaware County has a homeless population, but from time to time we do help veterans that have been displaced. They've been evicted from their homes, or they've lost their job and they're no longer able to pay for their rent, so we'll provide financial assistance. So if you know a veteran that's in need, you can contact our office and we'll try and reach out to that veteran and see if there's anything we can help with. Any questions? Yes?
So are these benefits for all states, or just, you mentioned Wisconsin, some of the, so it was...
The benefits that are on this sheet are all through the federal VA. So any veteran that lives in the United States is eligible to these benefits. And each state has a different type of department or commission, or they have different names for them, districts, whatever the case may be. They have that set up to help veterans. We are very, very lucky in Wisconsin because every county in Wisconsin and the tribes, so I think that totals 83, so we have 72 counties, and then the tribes, they each have their own county veteran service officer and staff. So that staff is knowledgeable in not only the federal VA benefits, but they can help obtain the state benefits for veterans as well. And what people don't realize is the state of Wisconsin offers this assistance to veterans through the counties. So like I said, we're not in the federal VA's chain of command, so that gives us an upper leg sometimes in getting the VA to move on things when they don't want to. We have the ability also to work with our current representatives, so we work a lot with Congressman Gallagher's office, and he has a wonderful assistant that's been there since Reed Ribble was in office, and she really knows her resources and has a very good working knowledge of the VA system. So anytime we have billing questions or veteran was denied a benefit when it's clear that he should be entitled to the benefit, we bring her in on the situation. We have them, the veteran or the family member sign a privacy release form so we can work on their behalf, and we try and resolve the conflict. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Linda? That's a good question. As much as I hate to say it, PTSD is everywhere, and people convey it in different ways. So there will be veterans that come into our office, and I know just from talking to them or some of their mannerisms and their actions that they are probably suffering from some sort of PTSD. So that we kind of have to treat with kid gloves, because sometimes that person doesn't realize that they're portraying that image, or that they have these certain, I don't want to say quirks, but they have certain mannerisms that just lead you to believe that they've experienced some of the combat stressors that can occur. And we have to kind of triage the situation and decide how bad it is. We are the first stepping stone in the process. So we can evaluate, but we can't give a medical opinion. So we have to either try and get the veteran into the VA healthcare, or we also have a counselor that comes from the Green Bay Vet Center every Tuesday, and she will work with veterans that have experienced combat. So what we can do is we can get them pointed in the right direction to receive help, but sometimes the people that need it the most aren't accepting or willing of the help, and that's where the challenges can occur in our job. But what I like to really make sure is in place for the veterans, so they don't get anxious with the process. I always try to be upfront and manage their expectations. So, like I said, if they come into my office and they're asking for assistance at the VA, in the mental health department, at the VA Green Bay Outpatient Clinic, maybe that might not be the best place to send the veteran at the time, because they're gonna end up having to jump through hoops to get that care, where I can point them in a different direction that'll get them help quicker. So it's just it's situational, and we have the means to get them the help they need. It's just dependent a lot of times on how willing the veteran is to receive that help. Any other questions? The King facility is still open. There were rumors that they were closing, and what they were actually doing was closing the portion of the facility that was housing homeless veterans. And the reason how that came about is because the federal guidelines said that they couldn't have two separate demographics of vulnerable individuals. Vulnerable being the elderly veterans and their spouses that are in King, and then the other demographic would be the homeless veterans. So they needed to choose one or the other, and obviously King was going to stay with the skilled nursing facility and that aspect of their mission versus the homeless mission. But there are a lot of state programs that have since cropped up that are helping veterans when they're homeless obtain transitional housing or more permanent housing. So if a veteran has kind of a marred past and they aren't going to do well on a background check, we have resources and individuals that will help the veteran navigate some of those roadblocks and get them into stable housing. Yes?
Is there any program for people that are being released from the service after their time of enlistment is up, where they get screened for PTSD or anything? Or is it like the old days when it just handed you a paper that said adios?
It's a lot like the old days. And what the military is now doing when a veteran has been exposed to combat, they come back and they have a physical, and they answer a survey or a questionnaire with a lot of different questions. Were you exposed to fatalities? Were you injured? Were you exposed to any type of explosive device or the IEDs? And a lot of the guys, what they're doing, so when they get back from these deployments, they're going through those questionnaires and marking that they're okay on everything, because they don't want to get labeled as having any type of mental health disorder from their time in combat. So that poses a challenge when we go to claim benefits for them, because the VA will say, well, when you got back from combat, you said you were perfectly fine. And then we also have veterans, in fact, I had one recently, that it wasn't until he had his first child after he got back from deployment that a lot of these symptoms and mental health issues correlated with the PTSD and the combat stressors really presented themselves. It was the stress of having a new infant recently getting out of the military and trying to transition family life. And I'd never heard that perspective of it, but it really made sense for me and put things into focus as far as why a lot of the Vietnam veterans had a hard time transitioning, not to mention the fact that the Vietnam era veterans weren't welcomed home when they came home, which is a travesty, and we've done a lot to try and rectify that in our community and make that era of veterans feel just as thankful for their service as the World War II veterans, Korean era veterans. So we're moving forward and progressing, but there still is that stigma with PTSD that scares me, because people aren't reaching out for the help that they need, or they go to the VA and just for to help you guys put things into perspective, how challenging our job can be. I had a veteran, younger veteran, combat, and he was spiraling and needed assistance. He was having some alcohol abuse issues. He had been in rehab, and things weren't going well for him. And he came into our office, and he was just about at rock bottom. And I sat with that veteran probably from 9 o'clock in the morning till 2:50 in the afternoon, trying to reach out to different organizations, primarily the VA, because he had established mental health care through the VA. And when I called his social worker, we had her on speakerphone, and she said, well, you wouldn't be in this mess if you stopped drinking and you kept up to your treatment program. And I could have reached through the phone, because that's the last thing that veteran needs to hear. And I said, well, regardless of whether he's following the treatment program that you guys have suggested, it's not working, and he needs something else right now. What can we do? Well, you can take him up to Toma, or you can go down to Milwaukee. I had called Toma. They said that if I brought the veteran up there, he would get assessed in their urgent care facility, and it was not guaranteed that he would get placed in a treatment program that would help him with his current situation. And you guys know that Toma's about 4.5, 5 hours away. So to find somebody, a volunteer driver, to take the veteran up there, and just to have a doctor diagnose him and say, no, he's not in dire straits right now, so he's not going to be in an inpatient treatment program. That was really upsetting, because he was very opposed, the veteran was very opposed to going down to Milwaukee. So here I'm trying to reach out and branch out and get him placed where I think it's going to be in his best interest. And then the social worker on the phone, when I said, well, Toma won't take him, she said, well, he can go down to Milwaukee. And I said, how about we take him down to the clinic by you guys, and you can assess him. Well, if he comes here, this is an outpatient clinic, and we can't do anything for him. And I later found out in the VA's directives and guidelines, they cannot turn away a veteran. If a veteran comes into the clinic, whether it's an outpatient facility or a hospital, they are not going to be turned away. The clinic could have assessed the veteran and taken him to one of the other mental health facilities in Brown County, or gotten him down to Milwaukee. They had a lot of options, and they just kept throwing it back on us to try and take care of it. Eventually we did get the veteran help, but I pretty much used every tool in my toolkit that day. And it was frustrating, because the VA wonders why we have such a high suicide rate of veterans in a younger age bracket, and it's because that's the type of resistance and roadblocks they face on a daily basis from the federal VA. So you can tell I get a little bit fired up. I'm passionate about my job. I do the best that I can with what I'm given. The VA is very frustrating, but there's a lot of aspects of it that do work. So my 2 words that I always tell my veterans that we have to be cognizant of is patience and perseverance. So you don't take no for an answer, and with anything else that's a government entity or organization, we all know that it takes patience. I'm sure looking at a lot of you, you've probably worked with Social Security and Medicare in the past, and those aren't easy to navigate either. So when it comes to veterans benefits, if you know somebody that has questions or is in need of talking to somebody, please send them to our office. We have the resources to connect people, and I think that's the biggest thing right now, is making people aware of what we have available. And to answer your question, finally getting back to that, about the transitioning, our county is working on implementing a sponsorship program that will help veterans transition out of the military. Brown County has already started this program. It's called Bravo Company. And because of their demographics and being a larger urban community with lots of resources, we're actually going to have to gear and set up our program differently. And that is something that we want to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row before we put anything out. And like I said, we don't have a lot of veterans that are transitioning out of the military that are younger and coming back here, but it would still even be important. We have a large population of people that aren't originally from Door County but retire here. So it could be an older population, but they still need to be aware of the benefits that they have available and who they can talk to when they have questions regarding the veterans' benefits. Any other questions?
Yeah, just real quickly, kind of back to the King thing, do we have to, when it comes time that your wife can't take care of you anymore, you get Alzheimer's, whatever, do we have to be signed up? Well, okay, I'm gonna pause there, just thank you. She must be planning on sending me there. Anyway, do we have to fill out any paperwork?
You will have to fill out paperwork, and King has a great admissions program. So they have staff that's available, I believe, Monday through Friday during normal working hours that you can call and talk to them about the admissions process. They would need you to fill out paperwork. They would probably need to have your primary physician assess what your care needs are so they know what hall you would be best fit in, because some of the different halls cater to different needs like Alzheimer's or dementia. So that's where the staff at the admissions department would help you figure that out. And then they can also set up, when the time comes, if you just want to be rolled across the street and put in the ground, they can help you with that too, because King has a large, okay. Because King has the one of the state cemeteries there. The other state cemetery is down in Union Grove, and then there is Wood in Milwaukee. When you drive by, you'll see all of the white headstones. Unfortunately, they don't have any spots available right now. They have nowhere to grow and add new veterans. So we have Union Grove, Chippewa Falls, and King Cemetery.
So how soon ahead, is this paperwork done, how soon prior to something happening?
I've seen it go through within a week or two, depending on the veteran's need and if there's a spot open. So it would just be a matter of what your needs are and how fast they need to expedite the process to get you into a place. If you are as you are now and you're able to walk in and you have all of your facilities and you can do everything on your own, I don't think there's a whole lot of prep work that you can do. It kind of, you have to kind of wait till you get there before you can start that process. Kind of like the process with the burial benefits. We'll have guys come in and they know what kind of headstone they want, they know what's on it, they know where they want to be buried, if they're cremated or if they're having a casket. They have all these options, but we really can't do anything until the veteran passes away. Not only because just that's the guideline, we have to have all that information before we can send in the application, but we've also had guys fill out the application before they've passed away, and then when the time comes and it's 5 years later, the VA has rolled out with a new edition version of the form. So kind of that they, obviously the name and the birth date isn't going to change, but some of the other questions that are relevant to the application would have changed at that point in time. So as much as I appreciate everyone trying to be preemptive, the best advice I actually can give you, and I've told this to my parents and my grandparents, just make sure that you have a funeral home set up and kind of a game plan of what is going to happen when you do pass away, and get your ducks in a row then, because a lot of times what happens is a veteran will pass away and the veteran had never discussed their personal decisions or their wishes with their family or their significant other. So sometimes the significant other is kind of at a loss because they don't know what direction to go and who to talk to. But if you start with the nursing home, we have a very good relationship with all of the ones in this area, and we're more than happy to work with them and their family on behalf of the veteran and make sure that they get the service and the honors that they deserve when they pass away. Any other questions? I think that's it for me. I don't have anything else. You've been great.
Thank you very much, Beth, and thank you for your service on behalf of our veterans. Any of our veterans have any stories that they'd like to share?
Thank you. I'm Richard Bisverley. I served in the U.S. Navy for 4 years. I went in December of 1963 and got out in December of 67. After boot camp, I went through Class A radio school in San Diego, which was a 6-month-long school. They assigned me to Yokosuka, Japan at a communications station at Yokosuka, which is a very, very large shipyard. It's about the same size as the one in Subic Bay. All the Navy ships that needed any kind of repair or any rest for their sailors would either go to Subic Bay or go to Yokosuka, Japan. While in Japan, they assigned me to go to Vietnam to set up a communication station. It was a ATCU, which is Air Transportable Communication Units. They came out of Hawaii. There were 4 vans, 4 diesel generators, and then all the antennas and stuff with it. We set this up near our Army Air Base in Can Tho, South Vietnam, which is right on the Mekong River. The communications was basically set up for the riverboats on the Mekong River. They would go out on patrol, mainly to pick up survivors of units that were shot up, and would get a lot of fire power from shoreland, and they needed air support when that happened. After we had the communication base set up right at this airfield, they could call in and they could get a helicopter or airplane with air support within minutes, which was really great for the riverboats on the Mekong. After that duty in Vietnam, then I went back to Yokosuka, Japan, and then I had, that was the end of 3 years, and I had 1 year left in the Navy, and they assigned me to the USS Porterfield, which is a destroyer. We went through training in San Diego, off the shores of San Diego, and then we went over to Vietnam. I spent, most of that last year in the South China Sea and Tonkin Gulf. We did a lot of shore bombardment, thousands of rounds, and we did that through basically just a small aircraft, a spotter plane, Piper Cub, would call the coordinates out to the ship and tell us where the buildings were, where the Viet Cong were, and then the gun directors would shoot. And believe it or not, even back in the 60s, that technology they had then was very, very good. If they didn't hit the building on the first shot, guaranteed you we hit it on the second. So that was quite an experience. The rest of the time in the South China Sea and Tonkin Gulf was airplane guarding for the USS Constellation, which is a large attack aircraft carrier. And those sororities were constant, day and night, where the planes would leave the carrier, go over Vietnam, drop all their bombs, and then come back to the ship. That was night, day, that went on until they'd have to go rendezvous with other ships to take on fuel and take on more bombs and for the aircraft. So I never regretted my 4 years in the Navy. I saw a lot, and I think we did a lot, and I'm pretty proud of being a veteran from that era.
Hi, my name's Ken Pollock. My wife and I grew up in Sturgeon Bay. Been living in Sevastopol for a little over 15 years now, and I really like it here. Back in 1966, a year after I graduated from high school, just about everybody I knew that was able-bodied was getting letters and being invited to go down and see the recruiters and fill out their obligations. So at that time I decided, well, I really wanted to join the Marine Corps. So I went down to see the Marine Corps recruiter in Green Bay, and I said, I'd like to join up. What are my options as far as having a choice of what I want to be? He says, well, if you join for 2 years, which is the minimum, he says, well, they'll pretty much put you where they want you. If you join for 3 or 4, you'll have some options. I says, well, if I join for 3, can I have a option of what kind of duty I'll be doing, like what job, what they call an MOS, but I didn't know that then because I was just a dumb young civilian. So he says, well, what do you want to be if you join for 3? He says, well, I'd like to be in tanks. He says, well, you know, if you go in tanks, they're going to send you to Vietnam. I said, well, my mom didn't raise no fools. I know where I'm going. I says, I want something that's big, well-armored, fast, and full of guns. He says, okay, I see what you're doing. So anyway, went through the training process, and around 1st of January of '67, I ended up in Okinawa, and thought I was on my way to Vietnam, but they kept me in Okinawa for 4 months with the Alpha Company 5th Tanks, and that was pretty much a training session. We trained for debarkation, for loading tanks on ships, all kinds of tank operations, operations of different kind of tanks, the gun tanks, the blade tanks, the flamethrower tanks. And eventually after that 4 years, or 4 months, I mean, finally made it to Vietnam, and then ended up spending 18 months there. The first couple months was for the 1st Tank Battalion, located just west of Da Nang. I was on a foot patrol recon group there, and what we did was go out in small units of basically a squad of people, and either daytime or nighttime we were out there looking for any evidence of enemy activity and coming back and reporting the activity, and most of that was pretty peaceful, although it got scary at times because our objective was to gather information, not to engage the enemy, because we were likely to be outnumbered if we tried to engage. So it was pretty interesting trying to avoid people, but yet get close enough to them to find out what was going on, especially at night. I remember a few nights when we got close enough where we could hear them talking, and we sure didn't want to let them know when we were there, because sometimes there was only 5 of us, sometimes as many as 8. So that was an interesting few months, and then eventually by the end of that summer, '67, I ended up in Charlie Company, 1st Tank Battalion, and spent the rest of my time there. And that was tank operations, and basically what we did was go out and join up with infantry forces and give them fire support and help, and sometimes transportation, especially sometimes hauling wounded off the battle scenes. And so eventually, and by the end of October of '68, after we had done as much damage as we could to defer the North Vietnamese Tet Offensive, finally made it back to the States, and then from there until June of '69, I was at Camp Lejeune and served as a battalion police sergeant, which isn't quite as serious as it sounds. Most of the time, all I was doing was assigning work crews to cleanup duty. So, but there were a few times when I had to actually go out and act like a cop, like go out and retrieve somebody that went AWOL or something like that. It was all interesting, and I don't really regret it. There was a few things I'd rather forget, but for the most part, I was glad to serve.
Thank you, Ken.
I'm Ken Bernstein. I was drafted in the Army April 28th, 69. Got out April 28th of 71. Basic was Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Had a lot of fun there watching the guys that couldn't run 3 miles. Anyway, I guess my story is a little different than most of you guys. I went to Germany for 19 months. They decided I was going to drive a 2.5-ton flatbed truck, and my mind is thinking, yeah, right, over in Germany on the Autobahn. However, 17 months left, and they asked me if I knew what KP duty was, and I said, I sure do. Peeling potatoes and scrubbing pots and pans. Well, would you like to drive a 2.5-ton truck now, which is what we want you to do, to deliver supplies from other companies? And I said, I guess I'll go take the test for the 3rd time and pass it. And it was a wonderful experience. Obviously, I don't regret it because it was the first time away from home. A little scary. But, yeah, it was good. Germany was beautiful, so I guess Uncle Sam did me a favor. I didn't have to go to Nam where a lot of you guys did. So thank you for your service.
Well, join the Navy and see the world. That's what I did. I went in at the tail end of the Vietnam era. I was able to get a slot on an OCS commissioning program, and I was commissioned as a line officer, surface line officer, or they call them ship drivers or whatever. I was the division officer on the CGN-9 USS Long Beach out of San Diego. I was home ported there for 3 years, 8 months. During that time, I did 2 Westpac deployments. We usually went with the carrier Enterprise, and the Enterprise, the carrier, had 3 or 4 ships around it at all times to screen it from air attack from any kind of enemy that was around. And I did 2 Westpacs, 6.5 and 7 months each. And we did a lot of patrolling. I never saw any shots fired in anger or anything like that, but I was all over the Pacific. As far as the Indian Ocean, we had port calls in Mauritius, Bangkok, Singapore, Perth, Melbourne, Guam, Pearl Harbor several times. I also made it to Okinawa. After I got out of active duty after 4 years, 4 months, 11 days, I was out a couple of years, and then I got a postcard in the mail from the Reserve Center down in Green Bay, and said the Green Bay Reserve Center, the Navy Reserve Center, and they said, "Come on down here, let's talk." I'm going, "Oh, geez, I'm sure anybody here will commiserate with me, because once you get out, you don't want to hear about it anymore. You're done. And that was in the past." Well, anyway, I went down there and talked. I talked to the officer in charge down there, and of course they're looking to recruit ex-servicemen back into the reserves. And I'm going, "Oh, geez, I don't even want to talk. I don't even know I'm here." Well, I happened to be sitting waiting to talk to the officer in charge there, and there was a guy sitting there, and I don't know if he's a guy like me or that he was being recruited to get in the reserves or not, but that he introduced himself, and he says, I never saw the guy before or since. He said, I'm Joe Blow, and he says, "What ship were you on?" I told him. He says, "Oh, no kidding, I was on, and he told me his ship, and it turned out we were like almost tied up nearly next to each other for a long time, and we had similar experiences, and I kind of had fun talking to the guy. I hadn't talked to anybody about the Navy in a couple of years, so that kind of, the camaraderie kind of got me, on that, and well, I ended up signing up for the reserves, and I spent another 24 years in the reserves, so so I had nearly 29 years in the whole thing. And when we were overseas too, our home port away from home away from San Diego was Subic Bay, Philippines, and I must have spent maybe 6 or 8 months there on and off. So yeah, we were all over. And well, I got one quick story. I don't want to drag this out longer than it have to, but I was with about 12 or 14 guys. We went on our 2 weeks annual duty, and this is the first part of the 1990s. And we had just gotten everybody into the barracks or wherever they were staying, you know, and we were all settled in, and I got our order stamped and whatever. And right across the street there was like a bar and grill and a bowling alley right there in the basement. And well, geez, you know, this is pretty handy. So we went on over there, and we were having a couple of beers and a hamburger basket or whatever, and they had a TV going, and it turned. This was when Desert Storm was going on, and we were there about an hour or two, and a bulletin came on the TV saying that Hussein had surrendered, had capitulated, and we had won the war. I'm going, and where everybody's cheering, you know, and whatever. So when I tell the story, you know, I always like to tie in that us being in active duty there had to have been some sort of a cause and effect there affecting the events over in the Middle East. So apparently when we showed up, the enemy had enough and he quit. So that's all I have to say. Oh, my name's Tom Fellhofer, and I'm a Velmy boy. I grew up in Velmy. I live in Sturgeon Bay now. So. Who gets it? Who's next?
Good afternoon. Gerald Nelson. I joined the Navy in June of 1963, and I did my basic training down at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center. There for 2 months, and then I got orders to go to Davisville, Rhode Island, which was a CB base. I got into the CBs. I actually signed up when I went into the service. I signed up to be a cook, but I had more mechanical background than being a cook. So they put me in the CBs. I spent 1 year over in Davisville, Rhode Island, and there I just did general KP duty for a month that we had to do. And actually I spent 1 month in a U.S. Naval Hospital over there because I came down with hepatitis. So they sent me over there, and then I did get a leave out of the hospital and came home for 2 weeks, and then I went back. Then from Davis, Rhode Island, I got orders to the beautiful island of Midway. 1.5 miles long, 3/4 of a mile wide. And my duties out there, I was actually doing my own construction mechanic, which I got into. And I worked in the big power plants out there to repair the engines in the power plants, and then also in the garage working on the vehicles for the base out there. And then from Midway, I got orders to Coronado Amphibious Base in San Diego, California. I was there for 2 years, and my duties there was equipment operator. So I was driving bus and trucks, and basically our main job was going out on the ocean shores with our cats and gill hoists for putting landing craft boats back into the water that got stuck up on shore. We had to back over top of them, lift them up, and then back them down into the water. And that was basically, then I did trips out to Chocolate Mountain with the Navy SEALs. I worked with them guys. And there was a division of UDT, which is not there is no UDTs anymore. It's mostly all SEALs now. And my last 2 months that I spent at Coronado Amphibious Base, I was Rear Admiral Yao and Major General Chung's driver. They were there for training at the Coronado Amphibious Base. And that was easy duty, because if they took a tour up to Los Angeles or something like that, I didn't have to go. I didn't even have to come into base. I just picked up the phone and says, I'm still alive yet. And then they would call me saying, Rear and Major General Chung is coming back in. So get your car shined up and go over to the San Diego airport and pick them up to bring them back to the base. And I took them all around San Diego, wherever they wanted to go. And they were real nice gentlemen. They weren't supposed to give me any small gifts or that, but they always I had a set of handcuffs that were put over top of my seat and laid down, and nice, beautiful handcuffs. And so they treated me real good. And then I got out in June of 1967. That was my service time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Hunold. I live up in Jacksonport. I went into the military in July of '69, got out in February '72. So my basic in Campbell and AIT in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. I was trained as a heavy equipment maintenance engineer, bulldozers, trucks, various things. And after that, obviously I went to Vietnam, and I come in at Cam Bay, and eventually, after a week of getting sand in your shoes, I went down to, they sent me down to Long Bend. I become a part of the 79th Engineer Battalion, and the company was the 79th Engineer Battalion BP, which was a bridge pavilion. We built Bailey Bridge, we hauled float bridge, assembled it and everything. And we hauled Peta Prime and what have you. I ended up being a mechanic in the motor pool, a truck mechanic, for the first 6 months. The last 6 months I was running convoys. I was a wrecker operator. But I went from anywhere from Tay Ninh into Cambodia, down south of Saigon, near the Mekong, and down that area. And I extended for 6 months, me and several other guys, but then we found out we were going to a Roman plow unit, which didn't have a very good record. So then we canceled the extension. They gave us 3 days to get out of country. But in the AIT, where I took my schooling, we were trained, like I say, to work on trucks and bulldozers and stuff like this. We were also trained to work on bridge pavilion boats and bridge erection boats, and only to come out of the service afterwards and start working at Peterson Builders. And what did I end up doing? Building bridge erection boats. I thought, wow, this is full circle, you know. But anyway, that's just the way things go. When I come back from Vietnam, then they sent me to Germany. Well, I was a heavy equipment maintenance engineer. I was with the 3rd Armored Division. Well, they didn't have no bulldozers and not much for trucks anyway. And so they really hadn't had no place for me. They bounced me around the company, you know, and what have you. And one day, like in August or something like this, I got there in the 8th of May or so. And in August, in formation at noon one day, they asked, we need a waiter at the officers club. Well, several guys raised their hands and they said, no, not you, not you. They come around to me, oh yeah, come along with me. And so he wanted me to change fatigues, get all clean clothes on and everything, and went down to the officers club. The next day I was the waiter at the officers club, yeah. I was the waiter at the officers club from June until the following February, yeah. quite an experience. You lived off post, never had to wear a uniform, never had to make formations or nothing. It was kind of interesting. Before I'm done talking here, you know, a lot of people have come to me and said, thank you for your service. And I've been told that I should say this on a podium someplace. Maybe this is my opportunity today. My answer to that has been, I'm glad to have served, proud to have served, and if they call me today, I'd be there tomorrow. That's my dedication to my country as a military veteran. And thank you.
man or woman, whatever, at the end, how could all these people have given so much for us? And do we say thank you? Well, today, no. We get to say thank you again and again. And yes, maybe my husband Ken did serve in Vietnam, but his job was. And like he always says, when they stood in line and they said, Ken, you're going, but this Ken is not going. He didn't put his hand up and say, hey, I'm here, take me. You didn't do that. You just knew that what your position was going to be. This is what Uncle Sam said for you. So, to those who didn't go, I think they served their purpose for us just as well. And obviously there was something he was doing in Germany. He doesn't talk about it like you guys could do in Vietnam, and I'm so glad all of you talk about what you did in Vietnam. And again, thank you. Our son-in-law just had the opportunity to chaperone on the honor flight.
Yeah, ma'am.
Our son-in-law just had the opportunity, just like 3 weeks ago, out of Milwaukee. He works for the Bucks basketball team, and they sponsored the honor flight over, and he was just amazed by it. And he hopes that he can chaperone again someday. He said it was really a wonderful experience.
Do you want to talk now?
Okay. First off, name's Richard Kinnard. I'm from the Brussels area. I served in 74 to 76 on the Juno. I went through A school and the grade in Chicago area, Waukegan. From that point, I was stationed out in San Diego. I went right straight to Juno. She was in dry dock. Then we went through our training. From that point, we went to Westpac. Our home port was Okinawa. From Okinawa, we did stop in a few other places, Subic Bay and Nukuska. One place we did go to was an evacuation operation, which was in Satahip, Thailand. And at night, when you're sitting there on the deck, you could see and hear the flashing and the bombing going on. Me and a buddy of mine went off ship on Liberty, and there was a bullet that flew by us about a foot away behind us. If there would have been to hit us, I wouldn't be here right now, because I would have been the first one to take the bullet. From that point, duties on the ship was down the engine room, steam turbines, and the auxiliary equipment. That was mostly my trip in the service. We did do our honor flight. I thought I was going to be the only one on the flight that I knew. It happened to be Daryl Kars from the Brussels area also went the same time, so him and I got together and drove down there to EAA. Went through our stuff and that. From that point, on the airplane, we got to DC, and we had different colored ribbons to get on each bus. And all of a sudden, this big guy gets on the bus, and I look at the vest, I goes, wait a minute. And here's the wife's uncle. So I went and talked to him for a little bit, and here in back of him, there's 4 guys with the same name. I looked at that and got done talking to the uncle, and I goes, stopped by them, I goes, you guys wouldn't be from the Rosaire area? And one guy kind of looks at me, he goes, yeah. I goes, okay. And I said my great aunt and uncle's name, and we ended up being short tail related. So it wasn't such short deal anyway. That's why if we could have hooked up the phone, I could show you the pictures of the honor flight that I went through. But they can't do it, so. Anyway, that's my story, so.
Daddy! Hi, Daddy!